Once upon a time in a land far away. Hello, Whiskers! This is another retelling from the Brothers Grimm. Today we're going to be doing The Princess and the Frog, or as it was known way back when, Iron Henry. So I'm sure you all know the new retelling. There's even been a Disney retelling of the story. But let's go through the old one. So it starts with a beautiful young girl, as the best stories do. And she's known to be the fairest in all the land and the youngest daughter of the king. She loved playing with her golden ball, gold like her hair, gold like the sun. And one day, the ball falls into a well in the forest. There's no one nearby, and so she's terribly upset that her ball might be lost forever, her favorite toy in the whole world. And a little frog hops along, and he sees the princess, and he tells her, "I will fetch your ball for you if you take me home, if you let me eat from your plate and sleep in your bed and be your companion always." And the princess agrees. She says, "Yes, I will let you sleep in my bed and eat from my plate and be my companion always if you fetch my ball for me." So down the frog goes, down into the well, and he fetches the ball and brings it back up. And the princess screams with glee, and she grabs the ball and she runs away. And the frog hops after her and says, "No, wait, princess, you're too fast. I can't keep up. Pick me up so I can come with you, so I can eat from your plate and sleep in your bed and be with you always." And the princess runs away. She ignores him. Couple of days later, the king and his family are having dinner, and there's a knock on the door. And it's the little frog. He comes in, and he demands to see the princess. The king, thinking this is quite curious, allows it, and he hears the frog out. The frog explains what happened, how the ball fell in the well, how the princess promised that the frog would be allowed to eat from her plate and sleep in her bed and be her companion always. And the princess said, "No, ew, that's gross. I don't want to do that." But the king forces her. He explains how she had given her word and that she had no choice in the matter anymore. So the frog hops onto the table and eats from the princess's plate. And when they go to bed later that night, the frog follows the princess. When he demands to sleep in her bed, however, the princess yells out, "You stupid little creature," and plucks the frog up and throws it against the wall. Just chucks him. And then, upon hitting the wall, pff, the frog changes into the prince. And then he spends the night in the princess's bed, and the next day they are married. And that's that. That's the whole story. That's as far as it goes. So we can see a couple of obvious differences here. Biggest among them, there's no kiss. There's no, "Please kiss me," and then I'll turn it to a prince, I promise, and then the princess just kind of tries it. There's no, "You promised you'd kiss me." There's just no kiss. So let's go back to the old story. What are we teaching here? I'd say 3 things are pretty important. The first is pretty privilege. So the princess is beautiful, and that's why she gets a golden ball, and that's why she expects everybody to help her out, and that's why she gets the prince even after being pretty cruel and not keeping her word. Then there's also the idea that your promise will be enforced. If you give your word for something, if you promise, then you will be held to that promise. And I think that's a through line that we get in a lot of old stories. Your word is your law, is your personal law. And if virtue is doing what you said you were going to do, being who you said you were going to be, and then this is definitely encouragement of that value, of keeping promises, of your word being law. And then there's also something about standards or boundaries. In this story, would the princess have received her prince if she allowed just any old creature into her bed? Or is it just because she denied him? Because that's not clear. She was rude. She was violent. She literally violently rejected the frog, and that's why she received her prince. Okay, so there's something to be said here about having standards and setting very strong boundaries. That's at least the message that I get out of it. Please let me know if you see something else. So then when we go to the modern version, it looks a little bit differently. So some versions, the princess is not forced to keep her word. She just kind of crosses her fingers, kisses a frog, and hope things work out. And then they do. And in some of them, she is forced by her father to keep her word, or by the frog's incessant nagging, depending on the version you heard. Okay, so depending on the version, it's a little bit differently. But a consistent refrain is that the child is aged up. In the original story, she's quite young. She's a little girl. In more modern versions, she's aged up a little bit. And then there's also the issue of consent and being able to withdraw consent. Because if the princess doesn't want to kiss a frog, she doesn't have to, whether or not she promised that. And that's kind of the difference between our modern notions of being able to set your boundaries and their notions of being able to set their boundaries. Technically, what the princess did was wrong. She had to keep her word. And yet that would have meant disregarding her own boundaries in terms of who she allows into her bed. So in the new version, either she's nagged into giving consent, or she's forced by her father to do it, or it's just kind of her own curiosity, in which case consent doesn't really play a role. But it is interesting how we teach girls, just kiss the frog, I'm sure it'll work out, which is a little bit of a different take. There's also definitely a greater emphasis in all the modern versions about humility / kindness, about not having too high standards, about seeing a frog, sentient and talking frog that it is, as also worthy of respect, of the respect of keeping your promise, and of care and love and a kiss ultimately. So there's that kindness in there that's definitely missing from the old story. The old story has no mention of kindness. It doesn't really matter what's going on in the princess's heart as long as she keeps her word and chucks a frog against the wall. So depending on which version of the story you've heard, which modern version, there might be more or less care taken with this whole idea of consent, and there might be more or less care taken with the messages. But definitely a big message is the difference, but definitely a clear message is the difference between pretty privilege or privilege versus kindness. So respect is something you give to others, which reflects only on yourself. So there's definitely one thing here that I have to say across all of the modern versions is an improvement on the morality of this story. Respect is not something that reflects on the people you are giving respect to. Respect reflects only on the person giving or not giving that respect. If you give respect to a man in the street, it does not raise his standings in life at all, but it reflects on who you are. If you respect a king, it does not raise his standings. It reflects on who you are. So respect is about something you give to other people because of who you are, not because of who they are. People don't deserve your respect. None of them do. Whether you respect them or not is evidence of your character. And I very much approve of that message, the message of respect, of keeping your promises, of valuing a little frog's life over chucking people against the wall because they are beneath you. And I'm pretty, so I deserve everything. I'm definitely going to lean towards the newer version being the better version here, especially with regards to kindness and respect. How would I rate the story? Bit boring, no twists, but it had the decency to be short. So I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5. 3 stars. Okay, so that was Iron Henry, or The Princess and the Frog. Please let me know down below what you think of this series now that you've seen the first kind of iteration of it. Have a good week. Bye, Whiskers!